Chapter 21 of The Boy Scouts' First Campfire. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Boy Scouts' First Campfire by Herbert Carter. Chapter 21. Step-Hen's Strategy Fails. "Don't throw your straws away yet, fellows," remarked Allan, after the drawing had come to a conclusion. "Thad has something more to say." "Yes," remarked the patrol leader, smiling. "After talking it over with Allan, who'll be left in charge here during our absence, I've concluded to take a second scout along. 3 will be better than 2 in case of any trouble." "Trouble? Oh, my stars!" It was Bumpus who said this, and he actually turned pale as he glanced down at the short stick he held in his hand. What if after all he should turn out to be the ill-fated one chosen to cross again to the island? He thought it would be just his luck. "Now it's only right that the one who has the next shortest stick should be the second fellow in the boat with me," Thad went on. "So let's compare lengths again, boys." Some came up anxiously, actually hoping they might be the lucky one, while others were indifferent, because there had been an interesting program laid out for that morning's work, and they should hate to miss the wig-wagging with signal flags, as well as more of Allan's trail talks, which were so great. "Davy Jones, you go," remarked Thad, after the various straws had been compared, and his was found to be the shortest. Davy gave a pleased grunt, and his face glowed with delight. If there was one fellow in the patrol whose soul seemed to crave excitement and the element of danger, it was the Jones boy. When everything else failed, he was in the habit of climbing a tree, and ascending to a dizzy height, performed some of his astonishing gymnastics there. No wonder they called him Monkey at times. "Me for another chance to hook a 3-pound bass, if I can get a few minnows with that little seine made out of mosquito net," announced Giraffe, after they had cleaned up the breakfast dishes, and the camp looked spick and span, as a camp always should look when boys are being taught how to live in the woods. "Of course you are, though we've got plenty to eat besides fish," remarked Step-Hen. "But they sure did taste mighty fine, Giraffe. And I'll take a turn with you along the shore. We can get on without the boat, I reckon." "Count me in that job, if Allan'll let me go along," Bumpus declared, showing considerable interest. "If you do come, the chances are 3 to 1 you'll trip on some vine or stone, and take a header into the lake," remarked Giraffe. "Well, what if I did? I know how to swim, don't I?" burst out Bumpus, who seemed to be carrying a chip on his shoulder these days, as some of the boys declared. "Course you do, Bumpus," said Step-Hen, coming to the defense of the fat boy in rather a strange manner, Bumpus thought. "I wouldn't be surprised if you could give Giraffe a race, and beat him out. He never will be a first-class scout when it comes to the water tricks, though if you hung up a whole ham as a price, it might make him stir himself some." Of course, Giraffe was indignant. "Why, I could beat Bumpus with one hand tied behind me," he declared. "Oh, you don't say so," mocked Step-Hen, who for some reason seemed to be desirous of arousing a feeling of rivalry between these two scouts, and egged them on as a boy who loved to see dogs fight would sick one on the other. "Maybe you'd be willing to back up that assertion right now, and prove your boast." "I'm willing if he says he wants to try it out," snapped the aroused Giraffe, who at any rate was not lacking in spunk. Bumpus too seemed fully aroused. The other boys crowded around with wide grins, because they fancied it would be a rather comical sight to see a race between the fat boy, who had only recently learned to swim, and made a tremendous splashing in the water, and Giraffe, who was a clumsy water dog at best, with one arm tied down to his side. Just then Bumpus happened to look at Step-Hen. He could not help noticing how unduly the other seemed tickled at the prospect. And then and there a sudden terrible suspicion gripped hold of Bumpus. Now there could be no particular reason why Step-Hen should want to see him enter for this queer water race, unless He had some deep motive behind it. What could that motive be? Did the artful scout expect to find a chance for searching his Bumpus' clothes while he was in the lake, engaged in an exciting competition with Giraffe, and all the other fellows having their attention centered on the race? Oh, he believes he can find out something that way, and he's just pushing me in over my head so I'll leave my clothes on the bank, and he can search 'em, was what Bumpus was now saying to himself. Indignation filled his honest soul. Thank goodness he was too smart to fall into such a silly little trap. Step-hen would have had all his trouble for his pains. So Bumpus, looking the other straight in the eyes, went on to say, "Come to think of it, we'll have to call the race off for today. I promised my folks that I wouldn't go in swimming more than once a day. Tomorrow morning, then, Giraffe, I'll promise to go you just as we said, you to have one arm working. And to warn you right now, you'll have to do your best, unless you want to be left in the lurch, because I'm learning fast." Step-hen certainly looked very much disappointed. There was a sneer as well as a shadow on his face as he remarked scornfully, "Huh! You take water, eh, Bumpus?" "Only once a day," replied the fat boy, calmly. And yet the look he gave Step-hen told the other that his clever scheme had been understood. Of course, the action of Bumpus in calling the race off convinced Step-hen more than ever that the fat boy did have his precious compass. If it was not in that old haversack, then he had, as Step-hen suspected, transferred the same to one of his pockets, and was even then carrying it around in defiance of the owner. Now, Step-hen could have ended all this disturbance by appealing straight to the scoutmaster, who would have asked Bumpus to tell, on his honor, if he had what did not belong to him. But it did not suit the boy to do this. He was naturally rather obstinate, and had a bulldog nature. "I started out to recapture that compass on my own account, and I ain't going to play the baby act now, and ask Thad to get it for me. No, sir-ree. Just you wait, Bumpus Hawtree, and see if I don't find some way to fool you. It's in one of those pockets of yours that stick out so, and sooner or later I'll prove it before the rest of the troop." Step-hen was saying this to himself as he watched the three who were to go to the mysterious island, finishing their preparations for the journey across the lake. But apparently the fat boy had already forgotten all about the trouble. He had a disposition that could not harbor resentment any great length of time. Like a little summer storm, it quickly blew over, and Bumpus was then the same smiling, genial comrade, ready to do anything to oblige his late antagonist. Thad did not have many preparations to make, however. Most of his time was spent in talking with Allan, and arranging for the work that was to be done that morning, in showing the balance of the patrol numerous interesting things connected with scout life. "I reckon we'll be back in time for lunch," he remarked, when Davy called out to say the boat was ready. "But to make sure we won't go hungry, each of us is carrying what Bob calls a snack along with us, some ham between crackers." "Well," said Allan, who secretly wished he might be going along too, "here's hoping you learned something about the queer men who've been using that island for some purpose or other." "I hope so too," replied Thad, "because somehow they've aroused a sort of curiosity in me. They seem to hide from us, as if they didn't want anybody to see what kind of fellows they were. Why, all the time we've been here they must have known about us, and could even see our flag flying from the pole in front of the tents. Yet they've never as much as said good morning to us. Never a peep," Allan went on to say, "and that makes me think there's sure something crooked about 'em. I wish—" "Now I know what you're going to say," broke in Thad with a smile. "You feel bad because I didn't fetch my double-barrel gun along on this trip. Well, between you and me, I do myself. It would have been a whole lot of comfort right now. But you know Boy Scouts don't want to look too much like soldiers. Some of the town people talked a heap about not wanting their sons to join a military company, and we had trouble convincing them that the scouts didn't have a thing to do with army life. That's why we've only been able to organize one patrol up to now. But the feel of that little 12-bore would be good this morning, even if game laws stood between me and getting a few partridges." "Please hurry up your stumps, Thad," called Davy, who was wild with eagerness to get moving, for he had envied those who were allowed to go to the island on the preceding day, and felt anxious to set foot on the enchanted ground, where mysterious strangers seemed to have their abode, and yet could not be found. "That's all I wanted to say, Allan," the scoutmaster concluded. "And as Davy will have one of his fits soon if I don't get off, I reckon I'll start. If we fail to show up at noon, well, don't worry. Nothing's going to hurt any of us that I can see." The rest of the scouts gathered at the water's edge to see them embark on the exploring expedition, and all sorts of chaffing was indulged between Davy and some of his campmates. Bumpus in particular was so pleased over not having been drafted to go in the cranky canoe that he seemed to be just bubbling over with exuberant spirits. When the boat had gone some 50 yards from the shore, he drew out his bugle, kept hidden up to then, and sent the most mournful notes across the water after the departing voyagers. It was so like a funeral dirge that Davy Jones thrust his fingers into his ears, and then shook a fist at the stout bugler, who, however, kept on with his sad refrain until Allan put a stop to it. And so the scoutmaster, backed by his 2 valiant assistants, set out to learn what the secret of the mysterious island might be. Nor did any of the trio suspect right then in the beginning of the voyage what strange results would follow this invasion of the haunt of the unknown prowlers. End of chapter 21.